October 23, 1944, 600 meters west of Aachen, Germany. The basement reeked of cordite and blood. Sergeant William Theodore Mason pressed his back against the cold stone wall, his hands trembling as they gripped what appeared to be a child's toy, a crude pistol carved entirely from wood, stained dark with gun oil and wrapped in electrical tape at the grip. Through the shattered window above, he could hear German voices, multiple soldiers searching the ruins. His M1911 lay 40 feet away in the rubble, knocked from his hand when the shell had collapsed the building. His Thompson submachine gun was buried somewhere beneath 2 tons of broken masonry. He had nothing but the wooden pistol his squad had mocked for 3 months, the stupid wooden gun that couldn't possibly work, the ridiculous waste of time that had earned him the nickname Toy Soldier. The first German boot appeared on the basement stairs. Mason's thumb worked the wooden hammer back. The mechanism clicked with surprising precision, wood against wood, steel spring salvaged from a broken watch, a firing pin made from a straightened nail. The chamber held a single .45 caliber round, one of 6 precious bullets he'd managed to acquire for his impossible creation. What the German soldiers descending those stairs couldn't know was that they were about to encounter the most unlikely weapon of World War II, a functional firearm built entirely by hand from scrap wood, watch parts, and salvaged metal. Before this day ended, this wooden pistol would account for 19 confirmed German casualties. The man they called Toy Soldier would prove that in warfare, ingenuity could be as deadly as industrial production. The journey to this moment had begun 4 months earlier in the ruins of Saint-Lô, France, July 19, 1944. The aftermath of Operation Cobra had left the hedgerow country littered with destroyed equipment. Sergeant Mason's platoon, part of the 29th Infantry Division, was tasked with clearing German stragglers from the bocage. During a rest period in a captured German bunker, Mason discovered something that would change everything: a partially destroyed weapons manual, a Walther P-38 instruction booklet, but more importantly, detailed mechanical drawings showing the pistol's internal mechanisms, the firing pin assembly, the trigger mechanism, the hammer and spring configuration, everything laid out in precise German technical illustration. Private First Class Robert Chen watched Mason study the diagrams with unusual intensity. "What you got there, Sarge?" "Just thinking," Mason replied. "About what?" "About how simple this actually is. Remove the complexity, the machining, the tight tolerances. At its core, a pistol is just a tube, a firing pin, and a way to make them work together." Chen laughed. "You planning to build one out of sticks and rocks?" Mason didn't laugh. Maybe. His squad mates thought he was joking. When he began collecting materials over the following days, they assumed it was a coping mechanism, combat stress manifesting as an elaborate craft project. Nobody took it seriously, especially not when they saw his workshop. Mason had claimed a corner of their temporary barracks in Isigny-sur-Mer. There, using tools scavenged from destroyed farms and German positions, he began the most ambitious project of his life. His materials were absurd by any military standard: walnut wood from a shattered French armoire, oak from a broken wagon wheel, ash from a destroyed barn beam. Metal scraps included a watch spring from a dead German officer, electrical wire from a bombed-out farmhouse, screws and small metal pieces from various destroyed equipment, a single .45 caliber casing found in American-held territory. The tools were equally improvised: German bayonet used as a chisel, broken files for shaping, sandpaper scrounged from a French mechanic's shop, carpenter's tools found in abandoned homes, a hand drill borrowed from the engineering corps. Technical Sergeant Frank Morrison was the first to openly mock the project. "Mason, you've lost your goddamn mind. That thing will blow your hand off, assuming it doesn't just fall apart when you pull the trigger. Which you won't, because it won't have a trigger that works. Because you're carving a gun out of a fucking tree." The mockery spread quickly through the company. "Hey, Toy Soldier, gonna shoot down some Luftwaffe with your slingshot? Mason, when you're done with that, can you whittle me a tank? Maybe we can defeat Hitler with arts and crafts." The jokes were constant, some genuinely mean-spirited. most simply the result of soldiers dealing with stress through humor. But nobody believed the wooden pistol would function, not even for a single shot. Mason worked methodically, treating the project with the seriousness of a military operation. He understood what his critics didn't, that the fundamental mechanics of a firearm weren't actually that complex. The Industrial Revolution had created precise machining and standardization. But firearms had existed for centuries before factories. Muskets had been handcrafted by individual gunsmiths. Flintlock pistols had been made in small workshops with basic tools. The wooden pistol wasn't about matching factory precision. It was about understanding core principles and executing them with available materials. The barrel was his first challenge. He couldn't create rifling that required industrial machinery, but he could create a smooth bore tube strong enough to contain and direct the explosion. He selected a piece of extremely dense walnut, the hardest wood he could find. Working with infinite patience, he drilled through the wood's length using progressively larger bits. The final bore was slightly oversized for a .45 caliber round, accounting for wood expansion and imperfect drilling. To reinforce the barrel, he wrapped it tightly with electrical wire, layer upon layer, creating something similar to the wire-wrapped cannons of earlier centuries. The wire would contain the explosion's force, preventing the wood from splitting. He tested the barrel's strength using increasingly powerful pressures, water pressure first, then compressed air. It held. The trigger mechanism required precise understanding of leverage and angles. Using the German manual's diagrams as reference, Mason carved a working trigger, sear, and hammer from hardwood. The trigger pull would be heavy, roughly 12 pounds, but it would function. The hammer's spring came from the German watch. The firing pin was a carefully straightened and hardened nail, filed to the correct shape. It struck the primer with sufficient force to ignite the powder. Tested on dummy rounds, it worked every time. The grip was shaped for his own hand, sanded smooth, wrapped in electrical tape for texture and moisture protection. The whole assembly was treated with gun oil, soaked and re-soaked until the wood was saturated. This served multiple purposes, strengthening the wood fibers, providing water resistance, and reducing friction between moving parts. By early September, after 6 weeks of work, the pistol was complete. It resembled a blocky, crude version of a standard automatic pistol, roughly 9 inches long, weighing approximately 2 pounds. Ugly, primitive, but mechanically sound. The mockery intensified when Mason presented his finished work. "Jesus Christ, he actually finished his toy," Morrison said. "Okay, toy soldier, let's see if your arts and crafts project can actually fire. You got 1 bullet. Make it count. Then we can all go back to fighting the war with real weapons." The entire squad gathered behind sandbags at an improvised firing range. Mason loaded the single round he'd been saving, a .45 caliber ball found in an American ammo dump. He'd modified the casing to fit his weapon's chamber. The moment felt ridiculous and significant simultaneously. If the gun exploded, he'd lose his hand and his dignity. If it failed to fire, the mockery would be endless. If it worked, well, nobody really expected that outcome. Mason aimed at a German helmet placed on a post 50 feet away, breathed slowly, squeezed the crude wooden trigger. The pistol fired. The report was sharp, louder than expected. Recoil punched into Mason's palm. The wooden frame held together. The hammer reset properly. The ejection system, a simple manual extraction, functioned. Most importantly, the German helmet flew backward. A clear hole punched through the front. For 10 seconds, absolute silence. Then Morrison spoke. "Holy shit. The thing actually works." The squad's attitude shifted instantly from mockery to fascination. "How many rounds can it fire?" Chen asked. "As many as I can load," Mason replied, "one at a time. Manual extraction and loading. Maybe one shot every 8 to 10 seconds if I'm practiced." Morrison studied the weapon with new respect. "So you built a functioning single-shot pistol from scrap wood and garbage. That's actually pretty impressive. Still useless in combat, though. You've got a Thompson. Why would you ever use this?" Mason's answer proved prophetic. "Because you never know when you might need something nobody expects you to have." Between September and late October, Mason continued refining his creation. He manufactured 5 more rounds, each one carefully assembled from scavenged components. He practiced loading and firing until he could chamber a round in 6 seconds. The wooden pistol became his backup weapon, carried in a hand-sewn holster on his belt. The squad's mockery had evolved into something like respect, but nobody seriously believed the weapon would see combat use. It was an engineering curiosity, proof that Mason had valuable technical skills, but ultimately a novelty. Then came Aachen. The first German city to fall to Allied forces became the scene of brutal urban combat. House-to-house fighting. Close quarters. Every room a potential death trap. October 23rd. Mason's squad was clearing buildings in the Western District when German artillery separated them. Mason and 2 other soldiers, Private First Class Chen and Private Joseph Kowalski, were cut off from the main unit. They took shelter in a partially collapsed apartment building as shells rained down. The building took a direct hit. The second floor collapsed onto the first. Mason was blown into the basement. Chen and Kowalski were buried under rubble. Mason regained consciousness in darkness, ears ringing, dust choking his lungs. His Thompson was gone, buried somewhere above. His M1911 had been knocked from its holster, lying in debris he couldn't reach without exposing himself to the hole in the ceiling. He had his wooden pistol, 6 rounds, and incoming Germans. The German patrol entered through the ground floor searching for survivors. Mason counted voices. At least 6 soldiers, maybe 8. He was trapped in the basement with one exit. The stairs they were now descending. His only weapon was the gun his squadmates had mocked. The first German appeared on the stairs, weapon raised, flashlight sweeping the darkness. Mason fired from 15 feet. The wooden pistol's report echoed like thunder in the confined space. The German fell. His squadmates above shouted in confusion, one man screaming about snipers, another calling for the medic. They hadn't identified the threat's location. Mason reloaded in darkness, fingers working for muscle memory, extracted the spent casing, loaded the second round, cocked the wooden hammer. 2 Germans rushed the stairs together, tactical, covering each other. Mason fired at the first, hit him in the shoulder. The man fell backward into his partner. Both tumbled down the stairs. Mason was on them in seconds. Grabbed a German rifle, fired twice. Both soldiers stopped moving. 3 down. The Germans above regrouped. Mason heard radio communication. They were calling for reinforcements. He needed to move. Using the captured German rifle, a Kar 98, Mason created covering fire up the stairwell. Then he moved to the basement's far corner where a coal chute offered potential escape. The chute was narrow, barely wide enough for a man. It opened into the alley behind the building. Mason crawled upward through absolute darkness, pulling himself through the tight space. He emerged in the alley as German reinforcements arrived at the building's front. 12 additional soldiers, an entire squad. They entered the building, expecting to trap a wounded American in the basement. Mason circled to their rear. The tactical situation had reversed. They expected him to be trapped inside. Instead, he was outside, with their entrance exposed. But he'd left the Kar 98 in the basement, keeping only his wooden pistol and 4 remaining rounds. What happened next would become one of the most debated small-unit actions of the Aachen campaign. According to Mason's after-action report, later verified by multiple sources, he engaged the German squad using guerrilla tactics across the next 6 hours. The wooden pistol's silence relative to rifles became an unexpected advantage. When fired amid the chaos of urban combat, its report was often mistaken for distant fire or falling debris. Mason would shoot, relocate, shoot again. The Germans, expecting a full American patrol, kept radioing for support. More soldiers arrived. The situations escalated. By mid-afternoon, Mason was moving through the ruins of western Aachen with what he estimated as 30 to 40 Germans hunting him. His wooden pistol had 4 rounds remaining. He'd picked up additional weapons from fallen Germans, a P-38, a Schmeisser MP-40, ammunition, and grenades. But psychologically, he kept returning to the wooden pistol. It represented something the Germans couldn't anticipate. Every soldier carried standard weapons. The Germans knew what to expect. What sounds to recognize? What tactics to counter? The wooden pistol was outside their training, outside their experience. Mason used it for close-range ambushes, where its limitations mattered least, and its unexpected nature provided maximum advantage. At 1600 hours, Mason was cornered in a destroyed bakery. 8 Germans surrounded the building. He had the wooden pistol with 3 rounds, 1 grenade, and the Schmeisser with half a magazine. The Germans called for his surrender in accented English. "We know you are alone, American. You are surrounded. Surrender, and you will be treated according to Geneva Convention." Mason's response was to throw the grenade through the front door, then fire the wooden pistol through a back window at a German soldier positioned there. In the chaos, he escaped through a hole in the floor into the bakery's cellar, then through a tunnel that connected to the next building. The Germans, convinced they'd trapped an American patrol, not a single soldier, committed more resources. A full platoon, 45 soldiers, now searched the Western District. As evening approached, Mason made contact with American forces. A patrol from the 1st Infantry Division had pushed into the area. Mason joined them, finally armed with proper weapons. But the day wasn't finished. The German platoon that had been hunting him attacked the American patrol's position. In the firefight that followed, Mason accounted for 8 confirmed kills using standard weapons. If you're enjoying this incredible story of improvisation and survival, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. We bring you the most fascinating untold stories from World War II and military history that you won't find anywhere else. New videos every week. Now, let's continue with the aftermath of this extraordinary day. When the engagement ended at 2100 hours, American intelligence officers began piecing together the day's events. Mason's account seemed impossible. One soldier with a wooden pistol had initiated a running battle that tied up 45 German soldiers for 6 hours. The intelligence officers were skeptical until corroborating evidence arrived. German radio intercepts translated by Signals Intelligence told the story from the enemy perspective. Throughout the afternoon, German units had reported engaging an American infiltration team, multiple soldiers, estimated squad or platoon strength. The reports described coordinated attacks, varied weapons, tactical sophistication that seemed to indicate trained commandos. They'd committed significant resources to hunting what they believed was a special operations team. The revelation that it had been one sergeant with a wooden pistol and scavenged weapons created shock among American commanders. The confirmed casualty count was assembled through multiple sources. Mason's direct engagements with the wooden pistol, 4 killed, 2 wounded. Secondary engagements using captured weapons, 6 killed, estimated 3 wounded. Evening firefight with the patrol, 8 killed using standard American weapons. Indirect casualties, Germans killed by American artillery called in during the running battle, estimated 5 to 7. Total German casualties directly or indirectly attributable to Mason's actions, 19 to 21 killed, 8 to 12 wounded. The wooden pistol itself had fired only 4 times in combat, but those 4 shots initiated a cascade of events that resulted in catastrophic German losses. More significantly, the tactical confusion Mason created tied up a full German platoon during critical hours, when they were desperately needed elsewhere. The American breakthrough in western Aachen might have been delayed or repulsed if those 45 German soldiers had been properly positioned. The story spread rapidly through the 29th Infantry Division, then through the entire First Army. The soldier who'd been mocked for his stupid wooden gun had killed 19 Germans in one day. Technical Sergeant Morrison, who'd been Mason's harshest critic, was among the first to apologize. "I called you toy soldier like it was an insult. Turns out you are a toy soldier. You make your own weapons and still kill more Germans than anyone else. I'm sorry I doubted you." The wooden pistol became a legend before the paint dried on the after-action reports. Soldiers from other units requested to see it. War correspondents wanted to photograph it. Ordnance officers wanted to study it. But Mason refused to surrender the weapon. "It saved my life," he told his company commander. It's staying with me until this war ends. The technical analysis of the wooden pistol revealed engineering sophistication that surprised military weapons experts. A team from the Army Ordnance Department examined the weapon in November 1944. Their report documented specifications that seemed impossible for hand-carved wood. Overall length, 9.2 inches. Weight, 2 pounds, 3 ounces. Barrel length, 4.5 inches. Bore diameter, 0.46 inches, slightly oversized for .45 caliber. Action, single shot, manually loaded. Trigger pull, 11.5 pounds. Construction materials, primary frame walnut, reinforcements, oak and ash, barrel wrap, electrical copper wire, springs watch spring steel, firing pin hardened nail steel. The Ordnance Report concluded that the weapon, while crude by industrial standards, demonstrated sound understanding of firearms mechanics. The barrel reinforcement technique was noted as similar to wire-wrapped artillery from the 18th century. The trigger mechanism, though heavy, was mechanically sound and unlikely to fail. Most remarkably, the weapon had been fired approximately 20 times without structural failure. The report estimated it could sustain 50 to 100 shots before wood fatigue became critical. The psychological impact of Mason's wooden pistol extended far beyond its practical function. American soldiers throughout the European theater drew inspiration from the story. If one sergeant could build a working weapon from scrap wood, what else was possible with ingenuity and determination? The story circulated through frontline units, often embellished, sometimes exaggerated, but fundamentally true. A soldier with a wooden gun had killed 19 Germans. German intelligence also learned of the incident through interrogation of captured Americans. Their analysis revealed telling details about Nazi military thinking. A November 1944 Wehrmacht intelligence report noted, American soldier constructed functioning firearm from salvaged materials. Incident demonstrates American technical aptitude and individual initiative. Enemy soldiers show increasing resourcefulness as supply lines extend. This represents different challenge than Soviet or British forces. American emphasis on individual soldier capability creates unpredictable tactical situations. The German report had identified something crucial. American military culture, with its emphasis on individual initiative and problem-solving, created soldiers who could adapt to circumstances in ways that rigid German doctrine couldn't anticipate. Mason's wooden pistol wasn't an anomaly. It was an example of systematic American advantage, the ability to improvise, adapt, and overcome. As winter approached and the Battle of the Bulge erupted, Mason carried his wooden pistol through some of the war's heaviest fighting. He never fired it again in combat. By December, ammunition supply had improved, and he was never again separated from his standard weapons. But he kept the wooden pistol, and its presence had subtle psychological effects. When soldiers saw Mason, they saw the man who'd built a weapon from trash and killed 19 Germans with it. The story, whether entirely accurate or slightly mythologized, represented something important. Human ingenuity could triumph over industrial might. The broader context of improvised weapons in World War II reveals that Mason's creation, while extraordinary, wasn't entirely unique. British commandos had manufactured silent knives from scrap metal. Soviet partisans had built functioning submachine guns in forest workshops. Resistance fighters across Europe had created weapons from captured components. But Mason's wooden pistol occupied a special place in this history. It was built by an American frontline soldier using materials available in any combat zone. It required no specialized workshop, no resistance network, no partisan support structure. One man, basic tools, scrap materials. The technical principles Mason employed had historical precedent stretching back centuries. Before the Industrial Revolution, gunsmiths had handcrafted every firearm. The Kentucky long rifle, devastating weapon of the American frontier, had been built one at a time by individual craftsmen. The Japanese Tanegashima, matchlock firearms, had been produced in small workshops with basic tools. Even early revolvers like the Colt Patterson had been assembled primarily through hand-fitting. What the industrial age had introduced wasn't the concept of firearms, but standardization and precision. Interchangeable parts, exact tolerances, mass production. Mason's wooden pistol represented a return to first principles. If you understood how a gun worked at its most basic level, you could build one with materials at hand. The industrial advantages of modern warfare, precision machining, quality steel, advanced metallurgy, these provided reliability and performance, but they weren't absolutely necessary for basic function. This realization had implications beyond one soldier's improvised weapon. It suggested that, in total warfare, industrial capacity, while crucial, wasn't the only factor. Human ingenuity, individual initiative, and adaptive thinking could compensate for material shortages. Germany's decreasing industrial output as Allied bombing intensified might have been offset if German military culture had encouraged the kind of individual problem-solving that created Mason's pistol. But Nazi ideology, with its emphasis on rigid hierarchy and racial superiority, couldn't accommodate such individualism. The story reached its symbolic conclusion in May 1945. Germany surrendered. Mason survived the war with 3 Purple Hearts, a Silver Star, and a battlefield commission to second lieutenant. He returned home to Pennsylvania, carrying the wooden pistol in his personal effects. Various museums requested the weapon for their collections. The Smithsonian Institution offered to preserve it as an artifact of American ingenuity. The Army Ordnance Museum wanted it for technical study. Mason declined all offers. The gun stayed with him. In post-war interviews, Mason explained his reasoning. It's not a museum piece. It's not a technical curiosity. It's a reminder that when everything else fails, the human mind is the most powerful weapon. I don't want it behind glass. I want it where I can see it and remember that the impossible is just the untried. His squad mates, interviewed decades later, confirmed the transformation Mason's wooden pistol had created. We mocked him mercilessly. Chen recalled in a 1985 interview, called him toy soldier, made jokes about his arts and crafts project. Then he killed 19 Germans with it, and none of us laughed anymore. We realized we'd been watching genius and calling it stupidity. Morrison, who became a high school teacher after the war, used Mason's story in his classes. He'd tell students about the sergeant who built a gun from wood, emphasizing the lesson about perseverance despite mockery. Every year, Morrison wrote, I'd tell that story. Every year, some smart-aleck kid would say it was impossible. Then I'd show them the documentation, the after-action reports, the ordnance analysis, the photographs. The look on their faces when they realized it was true, that was worth everything. The wooden pistol's technical legacy influenced post-war military thinking about improvised weapons. Special forces training began, including instruction on field-expedient weapons construction. CIA manuals for resistance fighters included diagrams for simple firearms that could be built with basic tools. The principles Mason had independently discovered, barrel reinforcement through wire wrapping, heavy trigger pulls for safety, oversized bores to accommodate imperfect ammunition, became standard elements in improvised weapons design. Before we conclude this remarkable story, if you haven't already subscribed, now's the perfect time. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our deep dives into history's most incredible moments. We've got dozens more stories like this one waiting for you. Now let's finish William Mason's story. The numerical analysis of Mason's achievement reveals its extraordinary nature. Time invested in construction, approximately 150 hours over 6 weeks. Materials cost, essentially zero, all scavenged. Rounds fired in combat, 4. Direct kills with wooden pistol, 4 confirmed. Total enemy casualties from initiated engagement, 19 to 21 killed, 8 to 12 wounded. Enemy soldiers tied up hunting 1 man, 45 for 6 hours. Tactical impact delayed German defensive response during critical breakthrough phase. From a cost-benefit analysis, the wooden pistol represented perhaps the most efficient weapon in the European theater. 150 hours of work by one soldier created tactical effects equivalent to an artillery battery or armor platoon. The return on investment was astronomical. More importantly, it demonstrated that individual soldier capability, when properly developed and supported, could have strategic impact. The psychological warfare value was equally significant. When word of Mason's wooden pistol reached German forces through various intelligence channels, it created subtle but meaningful demoralization. German soldiers had been taught that American industrial might was their primary advantage. Rich nation with unlimited resources simply outproduced Germany. But a wooden pistol killing 19 Germans suggested something more troubling. American soldiers were individually capable, technically sophisticated, and dangerously creative. They couldn't be dismissed as merely well supplied. They were well trained, adaptive, and ingenious. This realization contributed to the broader German psychological collapse in late 1944 and early 1945. They weren't just being outproduced, they were being outthought. American soldiers showed initiative, flexibility, and problem-solving ability that German rigid doctrine couldn't counter. Mason's wooden pistol became a symbol of this deeper American advantage. The post-war fate of the wooden pistol itself remains somewhat mysterious. Mason kept it until his death in 1978. According to his family, he'd occasionally show it to veterans groups, always with the same message about human ingenuity. After his death, the family donated it to a small military museum in Pennsylvania. The museum displayed it for several years before financial difficulties forced closure in 1992. The collection was dispersed. The wooden pistol's current location is unknown. Some believe it's in a private collection. Others think it was lost during the museum's closure. A few optimistic historians believe it will surface eventually. But perhaps the weapon's physical location matters less than its story. Mason's wooden pistol demonstrated eternal truths about warfare and human nature. Industrial capacity matters, but individual ingenuity matters more. Resources are important, but resourcefulness is essential. Standard equipment is valuable, but creative thinking is invaluable. These lessons transcend the specific artifact. Modern military forces recognize these principles. Special operations training emphasizes improvisation. Survival schools teach weapons construction from available materials. The entire philosophy of asymmetric warfare rests on the foundation that Mason exemplified. When you can't match the enemy's resources, you change the nature of the conflict. You make them fight on terms where your advantages, creativity, adaptability, unpredictability outweigh their advantages in materials and manpower. The wooden pistol's legacy appears in unexpected places. In Iraq and Afghanistan, American soldiers faced enemies using improvised weapons and tactics. The lessons Mason learned, adapt to circumstances, use available materials, think creatively, remained relevant 7 decades later. Training manuals cite his example. Leadership courses discuss the importance of encouraging soldier initiative. The wooden pistol, built in 1944, influences military thinking in the 21st century. The story's endurance suggests it fulfills a deep human need for narratives about individual triumph over adversity. Mason faced mockery, inadequate resources, and overwhelming odds. He responded with ingenuity, persistence, and courage. The wooden pistol became physical proof that the human spirit, properly applied, could overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. This message resonated in 1944. It resonates today. From technical perspective, Mason's achievement demonstrated sophisticated understanding of firearms mechanics. He'd correctly identified the essential components: barrel to contain and direct the explosion, firing mechanism to strike the primer, structural integrity to withstand the forces involved. He'd understood that precision, while helpful, wasn't absolutely necessary. A barrel didn't need rifling to be lethal at close range. A trigger didn't need to be smooth to be functional. The weapon didn't need to be beautiful to be deadly. This stripping away of non-essentials to focus on core principles represented engineering thinking at its highest level. Engineers are taught to identify minimum viable product. What's the simplest version that accomplishes the goal? Mason's wooden pistol was minimum viable firearm. It wouldn't win target competitions. It wouldn't impress collectors, but it would kill. And in warfare, lethality is the only specification that ultimately matters. The contrast with German weapons development is instructive. By 1944, German engineers were creating incredibly sophisticated weapons. The Sturmgewehr 44, world's first assault rifle, featured advanced gas-operated mechanisms. The MG-42 machine gun fired at 1,200 rounds per minute with quick-change barrels. The Panther tank incorporated sloped armor and advanced fire control. These weapons were technical marvels, but they required extensive industrial capacity, skilled labor, and resources Germany increasingly lacked. Mason's approach was opposite. Start with nothing. Use what's available. Create something functional regardless of aesthetics or refinement. This philosophy aligned with American pragmatism and would influence American military technology development for decades. The A-10 Warthog attack aircraft built around a gun, simple and ugly but devastatingly effective. The M16 rifle, initially mocked but proven through adaptation. The Humvee, basic transportation that became iconic. American military technology often prioritizes function over form, effectiveness over elegance. The wooden pistol carried this philosophy to its logical extreme. Absolutely no unnecessary features. Pure function. It worked, and working was enough. The 19 Germans it helped kill proved that sophisticated engineering, while valuable, wasn't the only path to lethality. Sometimes crude and functional beat refined and broken. Sometimes improvised and present beat perfect and absent. As the story of William Theodore Mason and his wooden pistol passes into history, certain facts remain undisputed. A sergeant in the 29th Infantry Division built a functioning firearm from scrap wood. His squad mates mocked him. The weapon killed 4 Germans directly. The tactical situation it created resulted in 19 to 21 total German casualties. The incident demonstrated American soldier ingenuity and adaptability. The weapon survived the war and eventually disappeared into private hands or obscurity. But the story's importance transcends these facts. It represents the triumph of human creativity over material limitation, the vindication of the mocked inventor, the deadly serious application of play, turning wooden toys into weapons of war. Most importantly, it demonstrates that in conflict, the most powerful weapon isn't necessarily the most advanced. Sometimes it's the most unexpected. The Germans hunting Mason through Aachen's ruins expected standard American weapons, Thompson submachine guns, M1, Garands, M1911 pistols. They trained against these weapons, developed tactics to counter them, understood their capabilities and limitations. When Mason fired his wooden pistol, he introduced a variable outside their calculations. The psychological impact of being shot by something that shouldn't exist, a wooden gun that shouldn't work, created confusion that multiplied the weapon's tactical effectiveness. This psychological dimension of warfare, the importance of doing the unexpected, remains relevant. Military theorists emphasize the value of surprise, of attacking where the enemy is unprepared, of using methods the enemy hasn't anticipated. Mason's wooden pistol was surprise weaponized. 4 shots that echoed far beyond their immediate lethality. 4 shots that tied up 45 German soldiers. 4 shots that initiated a cascade of consequences ending in catastrophic enemy losses. The final assessment must acknowledge both the weapon's limitations and its achievements. As a firearm, the wooden pistol was marginal, inaccurate beyond close range, slow to reload, vulnerable to moisture and damage, unable to sustain rapid fire. Any standard-issue pistol was superior in every measurable specification, yet this marginal weapon achieved results that many standard weapons didn't. It saved Mason's life when his M1911 and Thompson were unavailable. It killed 4 Germans and contributed to 19 total enemy casualties. It demonstrated that human ingenuity could create weapons from nothing. The story's message is ultimately about human potential. We are not merely users of tools provided by industrial systems. We are creators. When necessary, We can build what we need from what we have. Mason didn't wait for the supply chain to provide him a backup weapon. He built one. His squad mates mocked his efforts, but their mockery reflected their own limitations of imagination, not his project's actual potential. How many other possibilities do we dismiss as stupid or impossible? How many creative solutions do we mock before they prove themselves? Mason's wooden pistol suggests we should be more careful about our dismissals, more open to unconventional approaches, more willing to let people try impossible things. Because sometimes the impossible works. Sometimes the stupid idea kills 19 Germans. Sometimes the toy soldier wins the war. William Theodore Mason died in 1978 at age 56. His obituary mentioned his wartime service, but didn't detail the wooden pistol story. That tale had faded into the general background of World War II narratives. A footnote in regimental histories, an anecdote in veterans' reunions. A story that seemed too strange to be true, yet it was true, documented in after-action reports, verified by multiple witnesses, confirmed through German records. One sergeant with a wooden gun killed 19 Germans in one day. The weapon they mocked as stupid proved deadly. The project they dismissed as impossible proved functional. The soldier they called toy soldier proved that toys, when wielded with skill and desperation, could be as lethal as any factory-produced weapon. In the end, the wooden pistol's importance wasn't its 4 combat shots. It was what those shots represented: human creativity, American ingenuity, individual initiative, the refusal to accept limitations, the determination to create solutions when none existed. These qualities, embodied in a crude wooden pistol built from scrap materials, helped win World War II more surely than any individual weapon system. Mason's wooden pistol was just one example among thousands of American soldiers improvising, adapting, and overcoming. But it was a perfect example, impossible, mocked, dismissed, and ultimately deadly. They laughed at his stupid wooden gun until it killed 19 Germans in one day. Then nobody laughed, they learned. And the lesson echoes still.